For those of you new to this community, welcome. Today hi Carmen, you are watching Feedback Fridays, which is hosted by myself, Carrie Brummer of Artist Strong. And I created Artist Strong to help artists like you build your skill and develop your unique artist voice. And that's one thing I get to help you with on these Feedback Fridays every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard is I get to offer you feedback and ideas for your unique art to help you grow. So that being said, let's jump over to some of the artwork that we already have to share. Hi, Carmen. Hi, Angela. Welcome, guys. Glad to have you here. Okay, so you're going to see kind of my screen go a little wonky. It's hard for me to see the comments and do the feedback I offer because of how I screen share, so I'm sorry. I'll have to kind of pop on and see your feedback. So the first thing I actually want to share with you so that you can see it is last week's Feedback Friday, Carmen was very gracious and brave and was one of the first people to offer some art to me that I could use for feedback. And that image that she asked us to give feedback on is on the left, and on the right is her updated painting. I think seeing before and afters can be really cool. And for any of you who participate in these Feedback Fridays, if you update your work, please, please, please share it with me in our Facebook community or on the Facebook page so that I can also celebrate the changes you've made to your work. Because I think here you can see Carmen really has a great understanding of form and figure in terms of proportion and placement of features on the face in the right painting, or on the left, that was something she was struggling with. She knew something wasn't quite right. And here I really have a sense of 3-dimension. I also really appreciate her textures, and I love the rich layering of those greens with some blue and yellow in the background as well. So I just wanted to give Carmen a shout out there. And then I actually asked her if I could give feedback on another one of her works. So why don't I get that out? If I can find it on my screen. Sometimes things do not like to cooperate. Too many bits and bobs. And then you guys see that like never-ending weird hole on the Facebook screen. There we go. So let's skip. So here's another piece by Carmen. We've got lots of work today. I'm going to see how much I can get done today. If I don't get to yours this week, don't worry, there is next week and I'll get to it then. So this is another work in progress by Carmen. She said it's around this stage that she likes to get feedback. And that's something I want to encourage all of you to be thinking about too, how asking for feedback when a work is still in progress is much more informative and actually helps your work in a different way than asking for feedback at the end. If you ask for feedback at the end when your work is complete, sometimes it stings a little bit more because you've already decided in your head it's done. And sometimes that means kind of subconsciously we're like, well, this is the best we can do. So when you get feedback on something that's finished, sometimes it stings a bit more because you're like, well, crap, why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't I change this? So I do really encourage you to think about when you ask for feedback for your art. So something I immediately like about this work, you can see that she's really thought about placement of features and form for each portrait, for each head in this image. I really love the textural marks on the face. Let's see if I can get my pen behaving. So like in here, I think this whole area is beautifully done. I actually hope she doesn't touch any of that again because I think it's so nicely done and loose and kind of lovely. I really like that. The only thing I guess I'm worried about with proportion is usually eyes are kind of dead in the middle of the head, so you can kind of measure and it should be the same distance. And here I'm kind of worried that this area is not long enough. However, that being said, her eyes, she does kind of look like her head's tilted up and her chin's kind of coming out a little bit. So if that's the case, the eyes would appear kind of higher in the head. But so I do think Carmen needs to take some time to kind of resolve and decide really where the top of her head truly finishes and if she feels that's actually the right placement for the eyes. So that's kind of the one proportional thing. So here, when I do this, you can see there's quite a difference in the length. That's something she can think about. I love her looseness of marks. This is something she's been aiming for in her work, and I think it's really nice. She is kind of looking at highlights. That's something that as she's refining the work, I think she should really be conscious of is where's the light source. Because of the highlight on the nose here, it kind of looks like the light is, I don't know, it's kind of coming like straight behind her. So it's almost like where we're standing and looking at this image right now is where the light's projecting, but there's a little angle too. So there's a shadow here. So it's almost like the light's coming this way a bit, but then we also see a shadow here. So thinking about our light source and where it comes from, and here we can see on the child's face, we see lots of white, right? So if we think this is the light source area, there can be shadows on this side of the face for the nose, but there'd definitely be some heavier ones on this side compared to this side, right? And that means this whole side would be lit up, and it's not likely this part of the nose would actually have that strong of a highlight because the bridge of the nose would hide that part of the face. So I think light source will be something she wants to think about to refine. And then I want to look real quick, as I do usually. I really like to look at images in black and white because I think that can help us see the work in a different way. So here you can see she actually has a nice gradation from black all the way to white, and she's been thinking about that in her background about her light source as well. So that's a really good decision. Here too, another thought, oops, let me get my pen back. So here, right, it's almost like this side's lighter than this side, but if the light's coming from over here, this area should be lighter than this area. Sometimes I get short on words when I'm trying to describe these things. So if any time you guys are like, Carrie, I don't really know what you're saying, doesn't matter whether you're watching it live or during a replay, please ask your question in the comments. That's why I'm here. I want to make sure I give you the information you need to make the best decisions for your art. And that's one reason it's really good to see feedback from different artists as well, because, well, you know, looking at this work, even if you're not Carmen right now, you can see ideas, or you can take ideas and lessons from this to apply to your own art. Yeah, other than that, I love the color. I do think, you know, her skin feels more refined to me than the child's. And I love the looseness of the face. If she wants to keep things loose, the only thing I personally think would help resolve it and finish it, if she wants to keep everything else kind of really loose, is refining the eyes just a little bit more. I feel like if those were kind of more realistic or kind of detailed, and then she left everything else loose, I think that could actually really finish it out without kind of overdoing things. Because that's the hard part, right? Is, you know, I talked about how lovely this is painted, but her light source isn't entirely accurate either. So that's something, you know, artistic license is also a choice, but I want you guys to make a conscious decision about whether you want to rework an area or leave it as it is. Sometimes there's beauty in what you've done, and it's good and valuable to leave that and celebrate that part of the painting and save this information for a future work as well. So yeah, another good decision real quick before we go. If you notice, the child's shirt is green and the background's kind of this pinky red color. That's a great use of color theory and having kind of opposite colors on the color wheel. It creates a kind of color vibration, a visual vibration that helps create contrast and a little more dynamic kind of feeling in a painting. So that's also a good choice. So thank you very much, Carmen, for once again sharing your work with us. I really look forward to seeing how you finish this piece. I think it has a lovely sense of calm, and that woman really has some serious presence for me. I feel like she's looking right at me and she's not even finished yet. So yeah, thank you so much. Okay. So next I've got, I think this was Patty. I'm sorry guys if I don't remember and I get which piece is wrong for names. So she's working from an image reference. So we're gonna kind of play with likeness here. We're gonna focus on that. One thing I wanna say before we start is I wanna speak to style. There's a clear kind of style and voice I feel in this painting. And that's actually, you know, again, that's the point of the work, right? Is we wanna kind of find our voice. There's something kind of modulated and modern looking. I don't know what the word is, but there's something about the softness of her paint marks on the skin and how it kind of feels very smooth and rounded and kind of sculptural to me. I think that's quite lovely and gives it a really unique kind of flavor. So this is one of the hardest angles that you could possibly choose to do for a portrait. So bravo for challenging yourself. That's something we always need to give ourselves credit for. Now, if I'm looking at likeness, there's a couple things I like to do. So the first thing I'm going to try to do is draw some lines here to see what I can find. So, oops, that is not what I wanted. let's try to get I want to get like I don't really want an arrow, but I want a thin line to show you so that you can kind of see some shapes here. So ignore the fact that it's an arrow. I'm just going to kind of draw this line and try to line it up with her cheek. So it's her forehead and her cheek, and you can see how that lines up on that image, right? So then let's try to do that here. Okay. So when we do that, what do we see? Does it look the same? Does it look different? I really encourage you, when you're looking at an area that's really challenging, kind of cover a space and give yourself a chance just to see one section. So you can easily do this with a piece of paper, right? So I'm trying to line up to the edge of her nose and cover the rest so I can see what looks the same and what looks different. And this helps me not be distracted by all the details in the face and lets me look at just one area of the face to help me make better decisions about my accuracy. So let's see, do I have a, oh. Okay, so here, something I've noticed, this eye actually looks pretty accurate. The only thing that happened is she's painted some white of the eye showing on this right eye. When you look in this image, there is no white of the eye showing. You only see the iris right here. So remember, don't draw what you think you should see or paint. Paint what you actually see. And this goes for any image reference or when you're painting from life and you want it to capture the same qualities, right? Or you want it to look similar. You want it to kind of match. Something else I would note is I think the red, this pinkish color on her forehead is a little too strong. I can see it's a hard one because I guess as I'm looking at this more, it's more a decision of what colors and tones you want to use to create the shadows on this young girl's face. So soft transitions are very important, and I think you're doing a really good job of that. But you've got kind of one kind of color for your shadows here and one for here, when really they're all the same kind of gradation or modulation of one color from light to dark. So keep that in mind. You know, if you're going to use this darker kind of more brownish tone here, make sure you really do have some of that pink showing through as well. I think down here kind of matches better in terms of that kind of color matching for looking at the shadows. I want to also look at the shape here. I think we're a little bigger. Look at kind of the distance of the hair here and the distance of the hair here and whether the width is the same or similar. I think that's something we need to look at. And just the shape in general. I think the hair kind of comes down this way a little bit and curls around, right? And I think that helps. Okay. Also, I think I have my squares almost in the same spot, and here you can see still part of her forehead. So it's almost like the hair needs to all come down a little bit here. And I don't know that I have my squares perfectly set up or these rectangles blocking. So that's something that Patty will need to look at to make sure that that's placed. What else would I suggest? I think some of this is really nicely done. This highlight on her nose just looks lovely. I don't know. I feel like there's a little bit too much of a curve here. This is a really nitpicky piece of information. And that's something too, like depending on the kind of feedback you're looking for, you can decide whether that's what you want or not. And you can make that clear in your communication when you ask someone for feedback as well. So I actually think this whole section just kind of needs to kind of soften a little bit and not be as exaggerated in a curve. There's one here for sure, but then the edge of the nose is out here. So I feel like here it's a lot stronger of an S. There's something about the tip of the nose and the placement of the tip of the nose. I think that's causing that. I think that this nose just needs to be a little bit lower, the tip, just a smidge of the tip of the nose. This is a super hard thing to do with a mouth when you're angled on a face like this. So that's something else I want to acknowledge. I think that, you know, if you look at the mouth divided in half, I think the left side is done really, really well. And is almost like spot on in terms of the painting. When we look at the right, This is another area where you could kind of hide everything else in the image to help you focus and see what you see. We don't see as much of the lips as we have in this painting. So that's kind of brought the face kind of to make it a little more square. It brings it out a bit. So observe the shape of that lip. It's just a hint, and it's really just shadow there. You don't really see the strong colors of the mouth. It's the same shadows as the rest of that side of the face and cheek. And then you even see even less of that bottom lip, right? So if I kind of make an exaggerated mark, this is kind of the shape of the top and bottom lip over there. You wouldn't want to outline it though, because outlining again flattens things. And you can see in this image, you have very few actual lines on her face. And that's very important to note, especially when drawing younger people, is that if you ignore those marks, if you kind of outline everything because that's kind of just your nature or habit, it ages the figure that you're creating. So really soft shadows, like I love this whole cheek area. Hold on, this is being annoying. I think all in here is just so beautiful. And you have shadows, but they're very soft transitions with some beautiful highlights as well. That's beautifully done. And I hope that Patty sees and can honor that part of her work and celebrate it. I want to see this kind of treatment of shadows extended to our darker shadows, and see, yeah, I think that needs to go down just a little bit. I think that would really help. I think, again, getting rid of that little bit of white. If I'm looking at this side too, I'm a little concerned about the space here. So do you see the, hold on. So if you look at the space and distance between her eyes in the photograph, I'm slightly concerned that this eye is a little too big, and be careful of the angle that you see for that eye. I think it needs to go over, it needs to shorten a bit and possibly move over a smidge. Yeah, I think it might even need to be moved over here a little bit. Beautiful work. I think she's done a really nice job even capturing the shadows on the neck. Again, I think smooth, soft transitions are helpful. So if we could create even just a little transition between the edges of the light and dark, with some dry brushing of kind of a middle tone color, I think that would be really nice, and kind of help soften that whole thing. So that's something with children we always need to be cautious of, is you need to kind of de-emphasize any clear lines or marks you see on the face or on the figure, because it ages them. Looking like we studied this shoulder a bit. I think this does come out a little bit more. You decided to move her arm going in, which is totally fine, but I don't know if that placement for me doesn't feel entirely resolved. It almost feels like she's hunching over a little bit right now because of that. So what I would suggest is you either ask this young lady to pose for you again with her arm at her side, because this seems kind of wide to me. Then I would, if you can't do that, I would look for a photo reference online of a young girl kind of standing in this kind of pose and superimpose the image to help you see if the figure's placed correctly. So I hope this offers some food for thought for all of you working from photo references. Beautiful hair color matching, and again, that skin tone, it really is this lovely kind of glowing. It's working really, really well. So I'm going to close that out and see if I can get to one or two more before we finish up today. Okay, so I've got these two lovely works. And here's the question. Karen, so she's got two pieces here. Oops. Oh, my program's being a little buggy. Let me see if I can move it now. For the peppers, I'm trying to determine the best way to finish the piece. I'd like some help or ideas so they don't feel like they're floating, and I'd like to add color to the piece. And I'm okay if it becomes somewhat contemporary in terms of style. For the water jug, I feel like there's something missing or not quite right. Thanks again for your consideration. So Karen, I might actually have to look at that again. Let me get that out. We'll do one at a time here. So let's talk peppers. One, the use of light on this is beautifully done. I love the highlights, these dark shadow areas, and how she was managed to leave the white surface of the paper to create those highlights or erased away areas. This has a very painterly quality, despite the fact that I think it's drawn. I'm actually not entirely sure, though. It does have such a painterly quality. It doesn't say in her image. So she said she'd like something so it doesn't feel like they're floating. I could see a couple things that could be interesting. You could modernize it and actually put a background that's like a tablecloth print of something really bright or patterned and heavily patterned, but actually just have it all flat. So they're almost still like they are floating, but you see the tablecloth pattern and you know they shouldn't be, and kind of consciously play with those two different planes. I think that could be an interesting experiment. The other thought that I have is to create some kind of horizon line. I might kind of make one here so that they're on a table. I think that kind of immediately gives them a sense of place. And then you could have kind of this area very brightly colored with some kind of background of a wall, and you could have them on a table that has wood grain. That might be really pretty if you wanted to add more detail. If you want the focus to really be on your peppers, I think you could have the horizon line, but then two just very brightly contrasting colors. So you still kind of have it flat because you just have done a wash of two different colors. And if you really want it to pop, you could have contrasting colors opposite each other on the color wheel. I think that complementary colors could be really fun here. And you could even choose, like, for example, red and green, because we have red and green peppers, or purple and yellow could be really nice, right? So it depends on how much kind of action or dynamic quality you want in this work. And as always, guys, something I want to interject here as well. What ideas do you have for this work by Karen? If you have an idea, please share it in the comments. If you've noticed, the way that I critique and offer feedback is I'm not telling someone that there's something bad about their art, because that's not the point. People are showing up and making art, and that's what I want. And that's not going to help an artist grow. Helping an artist means that you give them information that gives them ideas to make better decisions for their art. So think about, what other ideas would you have to kind of play with this piece and see what happens? I could see collage elements added for those pattern bits that I talked about, like a red and white checkered tablecloth, a very like stereotypical picnic tablecloth. You could even just collage that in and around. That might be interesting. Or collage to the horizon line and then paint a color in the background. I think you could really play with this and make it something, kind of twist it around and give it a whole new story. Another thing I would encourage you to look at is you could look at some Dutch painters who did vanitas paintings, still lifes, vanitas painting, and they did still life paintings to tell stories. And you might just see a bunch of still life paintings and get some inspiration there for the work as well. I do hope that you'll share what you decide to do with it. Okay, let's talk about water jug. Something's missing or not quite right. Okay, so again, I think with this water jug, we have such a lovely attention to detail with light and dark and shadow that it has a sense of 3-dimension. And then the background, we kind of have a hint of a shadow, but it does feel like it's floating in space because we don't really have a horizon line or a clear stop and start of where it's placed. So placing a horizon line, which can be kind of the edge of the table, it could be a wall in the background. You decide where and where you want it and what it would look like. I don't ever really recommend placing a horizon dead in the middle of a painting. Of course, you're welcome to break those rules and prove me wrong about whether that's a kind of a successful choice or not. But I think somewhere in here could be really nice. And having some kind of contrasting color and a little more emphasis on the shadows underneath, I think would really ground this image. And the reason I suggest that is because she has very clear, strong lights and darks in this image on the jug, but nowhere else. So if we take a black and white image of this, we'll see that we don't have the strong tones in the background that we do in the image. Kind of the background is all the same kind of gray. It just has a lot of texture that moves in different directions. And the texture is really nice. I think that's a lovely quality for the work. It's just in terms of placing it and kind of finishing it up. I think having a clear place where the jug is placed would really help. Something to consider as well is when we have something rounded, it should match on both sides unless there's something about the jug that's kind of hand done. So there's something kind of down here and here where it feels a little bit fatter or rounded on this side. So that's just some food for thought in terms of accuracy of the drawing. I don't know that that is actually super important to this work, because I do think this work is a lot more about observing light and dark and using texture and color to create form. So again, think about your intention for the work that you're creating and how that intention will inform the decisions you make for your work. So wow, I have so many more artworks I wanted to get to today, but I think it looks like we are almost wrapped up for today. So I want to thank Carmen, Patty, and Karen today. And I'm really sorry if I didn't get to your work this week, but I have a list of you and I've been saving your emails, and I will make sure that I get to as many of you next week as I can. And before I wrap up, I want to remind you that every October I host a challenge called Be Creatively Courageous. And it's not like any other challenge. A lot of challenges that artists sign up for give you a list of things to draw or kind of activities to do or a commitment to make art every day. But I want you to make a goal that suits your art and your heart, the kind of heartfelt driven hopes and dreams you have for your art. So October for us in this community is all about deciding on a goal that suits your artwork and using the community resources and these Feedback Fridays to help you reach those goals in October. So if that sounds like fun to you, I'll make sure that I have the link in the chat roll and in the kind of header for this by the end of when I'm done with the live play. I'd love for you to sign up and join us for Be Creatively Courageous. It's completely free, and it's just another way to try to help you guys reach for those art goals and art dreams that you have. So I do hope if you enjoyed this video that you'll like it and share it with others who might benefit from this. And do email me or share your artwork via Facebook if you are interested in getting feedback on your art during one of these Feedback Fridays. Thank you guys so much for being in this community space. I am so very grateful for you and your time, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll see you next Friday.